And welcome to Stargazing, a guide to DC's Stargirl. Today we're talking about episode 4, Wildcat. Be sure to watch the episode if you haven't, because there will be spoilers, and oh boy, there's so much to talk about. Let's get into it. Now, this is actually an episode that I have been eagerly anticipating since the premiere of this show because it focuses on our brand new Wildcat, Yolanda Montez. You see, Yolanda has always had something of a special place in my heart as a comics character. She first debuted back in Crisis on Infinite Earths, and as you maybe can tell with this dog-eared old copy, Crisis was one of the first books that I got when I was 10 or 11, first getting into the DC universe, and it played a monumental role in helping introduce me to the DC universe as a whole. And right in it is the very first, in-costume appearance of Yolanda Montez, and it introduced me not only to the idea of Wildcat and this character of Ted Grant, but it also introduced me to the legacy concept, really. And as such, I've always had a special place in my heart for Yolanda, especially when I later found out that she was kind of screwed over. It's kind of hard to think about in our post-Jaime Reyes, Kamala Khan, Miles Morales world of superheroes, but there was a time when DC could replace a character with a woman of color legacy version, and then that character gets screwed over by getting killed off in a crappy event and then replaced with a new white guy. So Yolanda was a character that I was a big fan of, but sadly never really got the chance to do much because she got killed off as event fodder. So, which is why I was so excited when Stargirl announced that they were going to be doing a new take on the character as part of Courtney's new generation of JSAers, which actually draws a lot from Yolanda's original team, Infinity Inc. But we'll get into that next time. Needless to say, I love Yolanda, and I was really excited to see what this show would do with her and how they would reinterpret the character to fit with this new story that they're telling. And honestly, I really dug the way that they're doing it. Now, we saw Yolanda briefly in the previous episodes, but there wasn't really much to say about her other than what they had set up. But I knew when we got to this point that we would explore it, so I didn't really mention it in previous videos. But I was really intrigued from the moment that we first got our hints of what Yolanda's character would be because of what it dealt with. And it's a very real thing that happens, and as such, I was really proud to see the show tackle an issue that has really been a hot button issue, that of course being slut shaming, and particularly nude leagues, and particularly in high schools. Now, I want to make one thing very clear with this video. I am in no way the right person to talk about that. I am male, an adult, white, and I went to a very small private school for my high school, so I have no way to relate to this concept. But while I have not experienced that, I do know people who have gone through, at the very least, similar experiences, even if not the exact thing that Yolanda faced in this episode. And as such, I'm glad that this show is bringing attention to it, and not just bringing attention to it, but addressing the stigma that can result from something that in theory should be a private, personal act. And yes, there's certainly a discussion to be had about the fact that Yolanda is a teenager, and that, the leaking nude photos of teenagers constitutes sharing child pornography. But I'm not going to get into that because that's way too heavy for this show. Instead, we will focus on how it affects the fictional characters in our discussions of them. And this episode actually reveals a lot about Yolanda as a person. We get kind of a sense of how this incident really destroyed her and destroyed her relationships with others for a long time. And it's not till Courtney comes to her and, after several episodes of trying to help and trying to be her friend, finds a way for Yolanda to really open up and for her to explore something new. I especially dig that they went into the family dynamics of Yolanda at home, as that's a pretty big thing to talk about with this kind of thing. And I know a lot of people who were very much like, I'm mad at her parents because they didn't support her. Which, that's really... her parents kind of suck. And I really like the idea that they're exploring through this episode that Yolanda can't really go back to being the person that she was, so instead, she, with the help of Courtney and by embracing this new identity of Wildcat, is kind of forging a new identity, a new Yolanda. And I really dig that. I dig the idea of finding yourself through superheroics, especially in teen superhero stuff. So, speaking of Yolanda becoming Wildcat, I thought it was really interesting how they really enhanced the tech of Wildcat's suit, because she is wearing the original Wildcat suit that was worn by Ted Grant, but it is all high-tech in this show, which really intrigues me. I like it because, similar to the Cosmic Staff, the suit sort of is the mantle being passed on, just like Courtney received the Cosmic Staff. So there's this physical object that is a connection between the two. But yeah, the tech enhancements I found really intriguing, because the tech kind of explains how Wildcat is so tough, because evidently the suit actually augments his normal abilities, which is cool and definitely a great explanation for how Yolanda, since she's not a metahuman in this version, how she's able to do certain things. But I also can't help but wonder, okay, but how did Ted get this? Who made this suit for him? Did the JSA have someone who was their tech person? Was it Abigail Ma Hunkel? What's intriguing, though, is that it also implies that Ted had the claws, even though that's mostly in the comics a Yolanda thing. Which, speaking of claws, man, she was just about to straight up murder Henry. Holy... Good thing you didn't, Yolanda. I tend not to be very approving of murderers in my superhero fiction, but that's just me. Speaking of Henry, this episode did a lot for his character, and I am glad. I was really, really worried that Henry was just going to be 100% douche for the entire show, but we're starting to see a different side to him with this episode. We've been seeing how he misses his dad because his dad is in a coma, but we also get to see his perspective on his relationship with Yolanda, and it definitely makes you reconsider and kind of question the opening or the first scene in the first episode where we first meet Henry and Yolanda, and he calls her a slut. But let's not forget that guys will do stupid things because friends or society at large tell them to. And this episode definitely pulls him away from being that two-dimensional jock bully and into being a more fleshed out character, because we see that he still probably has some feelings for Yolanda, and some concern. I mean, and he wasn't even responsible for the pictures getting out, despite what Courtney and Yolanda think. That was Cindy. And oh my god, Cindy. Freaking Cindy. Cindy is the worst. Oh my god, she's the worst. Just the worst. Just the worst. That's all I can say about Cindy. She's the worst. The worst. The worst. Although, speaking of Cindy, this episode also gives us our first appearance by Dr. Ito, aka the Dragon King. Oh, I love Dragon King in this show. The costume, the makeup, the voice, the intricate, like the little eye slits. Beautiful. And thanks to Dr. Ito, we get some more backstory for the ISA, little hints towards how they first formed, how the Shade betrayed them, which, of course, if one of them was going to betray them, it's the Shade. And yes, confirmation on the Shade. And how apparently Dr. Ito and the Wizard did not get along. How he wants his body for something. That's we're gonna see how that goes. That's intriguing, to say the least. And of course, speaking of the ISA, man, I am just killing it with the segues today. We get to see Principal Bowen using a violin. Now, of course, as I've talked about previously, we have seen the white man version of the fiddler, but this seems to indicate that he is maybe not around, and I'm really interested in seeing how the fiddler family story gets told. Because we gotta see that, right? And like we gotta know what happened. Like we gotta know, right? Come on. You know, one of the standout characters in this episode, I actually feel, is this guy. The staff has actually been kind of a star player in this episode, weirdly. No, that pun was not intended. It almost seems like the staff is actually the one that is hunting down the villains, as it starts to flip out right when Principal Bowen entered the hospital. And it was the one that originally carried Courtney to the drive-in where Henry was and his dad's car was. So I'm wondering if the staff is kind of specifically seeking out the ISA members. And I'm really intrigued about that. Also, gotta love how the staff had to actually prevent Courtney from shutting off power in a hospital. Come on, Court. In fact, that was actually kind of a recurring theme for this episode, wasn't it? Courtney being really dumb. Is it too much of a show move if I said that I actually kind of liked that? I can appreciate the idea that a character doesn't know entirely what they're doing and are kind of half-assing it as they learn. Especially when that character is a teenager. You know, that's fun storytelling. I don't know. I liked it. I like everything in this show. Oh my god, I'm a fucking shell. But yeah, between wanting to turn off power to a hospital and scratching through your toaster and just putting it back and checking Wikipedia to learn what Wildcat can do, which, I mean, admittedly, I relate. You know, this episode almost could have been called Courtney's Dumb Decisions. And of course, not only are we following the kids as they embrace the life of superheroism, we also follow Mr. Pat Dugan as he learns more and more about the sinister nature of Blue Valley. And rip Denise, am I right? Alrighty, that's pretty much everything in the main episode itself that I wanted to talk about. So, let's move on to Easter eggs. Now, there are two primary Easter eggs that I want to highlight. First, we are getting even more setup for Jakeem Thunder. Not only did the Thunderbolt pin get a whole scene dedicated to it with yet another laugh from Yeez, but we also get a mention of Jakeem by Mike. This definitely seems to be hinting that they are setting up Jakeem either for this season or for next season. More likely next season. And if I had to guess how Jakeem is going to get that pen, I imagine Mike may have something to do with that. After all, if he needs to steal a pen from Courtney's room, who's going to care? The other Easter egg, which is also a character cameo that I want to highlight, is Yolanda Montez. Now, in the comics, Yolanda's little brother is named Jose, and Alexander is her cousin. This show is kind of meshing the two together by making Alexander her brother, but Alexander exhibits a lot of the same traits that Alexander in the comics had, particularly his caring and protective nature of Yolanda. Now, in the comics, Alexander was a supporting character in Jeff Johns' JSA run, and later on, Alex took on the mantle of Eclipso in a weird kind of reclaiming the title and powers of the guy who killed my cousin in order to be like an anti-hero, and teaming up with Black Adam and Atom Smasher and Brainwave and Northwind in a excellent arc. And I think that's actually really clever, kind of just mushing these two characters together so that if you do want to have Alex be a bigger presence in the show later on, you can do that. And it makes more sense for Alex to be her brother than her cousin. Alrighty, now time for reading recommendations. However, during this time, I would like to say that if you are able, please continue to support the Black Lives Matter movement. Links are in the description to resources you can find, bail funds, donations for victims, etc. Now, as I said at the top of this episode, Yolanda first became Wildcat in Crisis on Infinite Earths, and I would highly recommend everyone check out Crisis on Infinite Earths because it is a classic DC story. Yeah, it's not perfect, but it's still pretty good for the most part. But Yolanda made her debut in Infinity Inc., and we're going to be referencing Infinity Inc. a lot in these reading recommendations over the course of this show, so keep that in mind. Yolanda first appeared in a cameo in Infinity Inc. number 12, and later on had some other minor appearances, but didn't really become a major player in it until the Helix storyline. So in order to give you 3 stories that kind of hit the key major points of Yolanda's introduction, I'm going to recommend Infinity Inc. number 16, Crisis on Infinite Earths number 6, and Infinity Inc. number 26. These 3 issues kind of hit the major highlights of the beginnings of Yolanda's arc in the comics, and I would recommend just continuing to follow her through Infinity Inc. because Infinity Inc. really is the foundation upon which a lot of the elements of this series and later DC Comics are built upon. And that brings this episode of Stargazing to a close, my friends. Be sure to join me next time when we talk about our next episode and continue the expansion of the Justice Society of America with Our Man and Dr. Midnight. As always, if you enjoyed the show, be sure to give me a like, comment, and let me know your thoughts on the episode. And if you want to keep up with Stargazing, hit the subscribe button so that you never miss an episode. And if you really want to make sure you know as soon as the episodes are up, click the little bell and get notifications sent right to your email. In the meantime, keep looking to the stars, my friends.